Good evening, family. Welcome to another episode of Black Wealth Wednesdays. This week is episode 3, estate planning. Now, this is a very important topic that we'll get into in a bit, but just as a reminder, Black Wealth Wednesdays brings you critical information from experts across a range of industries to help start the process of building generational wealth for Black families. So, again, let's get right into it, shall we? Estate planning. This is an important topic because about 42% of all Americans die without wills, but even worse in the African American community, 70%. 70% of us die without having any will, without having any plan left in place to transfer what wealth or assets that we came by while we were on this side of the veil. Why is that important? This is because dying, it's called dying intestate, which means dying without a will not only blocks the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next, it also puts a financial burden or strain on those that we leave behind. So think funeral costs, burials, any bills that you leave behind. So it's a very important aspect in the fight to build generational wealth and change family trees. So this evening, we have a very special guest who is a good friend of mine. Her name is attorney Lynn Carter. Lynn is a solo practitioner at the Carter Law Firm with offices in Annapolis and Salisbury, Maryland. Her areas of practice are estate planning, family law, and real property. In her estate planning practice, she works with other experts such as financial advisors, insurance agents, accountants, and more to ensure that her clients have a comprehensive plan that will benefit them and their loved ones. So that's the nice little thing that Attorney Carter typed up for herself, and she's going to get me for this, but I'm on right now and she's not. Let me tell you about the real Lynn Carter. Lynn is one of the most caring, compassionate women I've ever met, and not only in her personal life, but in her professional life as well. This is a woman that goes above and beyond for her clients. She treats everyone as family, and she is one of the most empathetic people that you will ever meet. So if there's anyone in the Maryland, DC area, I encourage you to reach out to her for any estate planning needs because you will never have a more compassionate, caring, and competent person on your team. So now we're going to bring in Lynn and we're going to get a little bit more expert advice, expert information about estate planning and how we can use this tool to create generational wealth. All right. Attorney Carter.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome. How are you this evening?
I am well. I'm glad to be here with you. How are you?
I'm doing very well also, and I'm glad to have you with us. I told everyone a bit about you, but just wanted to give you an opportunity to greet our audience as well, to say anything as far as letting them know who you are, what you're about, and then we'll get right into the questions and everything.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here with you all today, just to share a little bit of information, particularly about estate planning and how it impacts our community. This is an area of practice that is really dear to my heart because of some of my own experiences. I've lost some loved ones, so I know how important it is to have a plan. In addition to estate planning, my other areas of practice include family law and real property. And it might sound like a lot, but the areas greatly overlap. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say I'm glad to be here with you, and I'll share as much as I can that will leave you informed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. So jumping right into it, we've talked a little bit about what you do. I've told the audience about your experience and your areas of expertise, but just talk a little bit about what the significance is in estate planning. Why is this a tool that people need in general and Black people in particular?
Estate planning it really is for everybody. You know, I think one of the misconceptions is that we tend to think that it's just for the wealthy, and it's not. If you are 18 and you own anything, whether that's a car, a bank account, then estate planning is for you. The significance of not having a plan is that you do not get to exercise control of what happens to your assets. The state does it for you. And if it's yours, I would think that you would want to be the one to decide who gets what, right? And so when you take the time to plan for yourself, then you can determine who inherits your assets, you can make the decision as to whether or not the people that are inheriting from you have the capability of managing that inheritance and managing it well, versus just kind of going through it, blowing through what you've accumulated. And now there's no value left to be passed on to the next generation. And it doesn't have the impact that we would want it to have in terms of making their life better. So it's significant because it allows us to essentially preserve the assets that we've accumulated during our lifetime, set them on a shelf to pass along to the next generation, thereby creating wealth immediately within that generation.
Excellent points. So before I brought you on, Lynn, I shared with the audience some of the startling realities for estate planning and wills that are across the general American landscape. I'll repeat some of that here. What I found saw that 42% of all Americans die without a will, but with African American communities, it's 70%. So
Yes.
significant. So I know that's, the whatever sample size, how these studies and things work, there's a sample size they look at. Within that sample size, it's 70%. Now from you, I know that you have a wide range of clientele from people of all walks of life. But as far as your African American clients, do those numbers ring kind of true to you, or is it more or less?
Well, I know that those numbers are true because I've done the research too. So I absolutely agree with the numbers that you found. But in my particular practice, it does not ring true because I intentionally go after my community. I'll tell you this, when I finished law school, I remember my best friend saying to me, "Your law degree is bigger than you." And I felt the weight of that statement, but it also helped me just to realize, wow, the opportunity that I have to share this knowledge that I was so fortunate to gain. And so my offices are near my community.
Right.
Both of them. I advertise to my churches and to fraternities and things of that nature. Where we tend to be, and I make sure that I share as much information as I can with my community so that they really understand the importance of it. Because as I mentioned early on, I've gone through the experience of losing loved ones, and some of them didn't have plans, and I know the impact of it. And so for me, I had to be intentional about targeting my community because I wanted to bring a difference so that other young people coming up wouldn't feel the same impact that I felt and that I witnessed from other loved ones. So in terms of your question, no, I don't see it because I go after my people. I share the information with them so that they understand how important it is. I'll tell you, for instance, one of the numbers that startles me is that less than 6% of parents with children under the age of 18 have a will. And a will is how you name a guardian for your children. So if the parents pass away, who's raising the children? Do we have family members fighting over them?
Right.
Hopefully not, but less than 6%, that's a huge number. And as you've already indicated, of course, that number is going to be even lower in our community, unfortunately. So just going back, no, I don't see it because I'm very intentional about sharing what I know so that my community understands the importance of having an estate plan. And I know that was a really long answer.
No, you're good. That's good. The statistics, I'm making my own statistics and we love to see it. So, man, I think that let's back up a little bit. You and I were talking about this a bit earlier, but estate planning is somewhat of an umbrella term. It encompasses a lot of different areas. So break down what goes into an estate planning service and what all does that entail?
Sure. So estate planning entails not just disposing of your assets when you expire. It also allows for you to make a plan for yourself in the event of incapacity. So the same way we have insurance for our cars and for our homes in case of a situation, estate planning is the same way, because in the event that you become incapacitated, somebody still has to be able to carry out handling your financial affairs, making sure that the mortgage gets paid, that your insurance gets paid, those sorts of things. And so one part of creating an estate plan is to create a power of attorney. Most states have this document already for you. It's a template essentially that you just kind of plug in the main information. So with a power of attorney, you have a principal, that's the person creating the document. Then you have an agent, that's the person that you're assigning to do the work. And within it, you get to identify a scope of things that they can do under your authority. And so managing your financial affairs is huge. You don't want things to fall apart if something happens to you and you can't do it. That's why you create a power of attorney. And in most states, you can download it, fill it out for free. You don't need an attorney for this document. Although I will caution and say, if you decide to do it yourself, make sure you read it thoroughly because there are a lot of caveats to it. So, for instance, in Maryland, if you use our form, there's a very broad scope of power there that you're giving to your agent. And so, for instance, you give them authority to manage your real property. Well, that authority is more than just paying the mortgage and the homeowners association fees. They also have the ability to leverage, to borrow against your property, to take out equity. And that might not be something you want them to do. They also have the ability to transfer and sell it. That might not be something you want them to do. And so my point is that you want to read this document thoroughly and understand the scope of powers you're giving someone and limit them where necessary. You also want to make sure you get somebody that is extremely trustworthy because this is a very sensitive duty that you're giving them. So you want to make sure that they're looking out for your best interest. But that's the financial power of attorney. Another document that's available is the advance directive. And this one is so that someone can advocate for you in the event that you can't make medical decisions for yourself. And this document too, available online at the Attorney General's website. No charge to download it and complete it. Great set of instructions there. So it's very clear, not a bunch of legalese, don't worry. And in addition to the medical advance directive, there's also one for mental health. So if you need that document as well, it's there. So these are two things that you can do now to make sure that if something happens and you lack capacity to take care of you, you have a plan in place so that there's someone else who can step into your shoes to make sure that you are okay. Those are two things. Another thing that I'll say that's really, really important that I think we kind of forget about it because it's just a part of doing the paperwork. You know how when you get a new job, you've got all this paperwork. So you do the life insurance that's offered through the job, or when you open a new bank account, you fill out your little signatory card and things of that nature. But there are other components that come with that. You have what we call beneficiary designation forms where you can identify somebody to inherit that asset and, if you expire. And those forms are very, very helpful because they can help you avoid probate and make liquid assets immediately available to your beneficiaries. Probate is not so bad in our state, but it can take sometimes anywhere from 8 months to a year to get through the probate process.
Now, hold on, let's back it up. We got a lot of Black folks watching. Probate, we ain't talking about coming and crossing, AKAs and deltas and whatnot. What is probate in the estate planning sense? Because I missed that. My mind went to, let me not get in trouble. I ain't throw up nothing specific. So, but what is a probate?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I did get a bit ahead of myself and that wasn't intentional. So the probate process is handled through the state court. In our state, it's called the Orphans Court. This is where you have judicial oversight in helping you to administer someone's estate. And what I mean by administer their estate is we have a loved one that is no longer with us. They have some assets that now need to be disposed of. They have their last tax form that needs to be filled out. They may have minor children where they've designated a guardian. They might have some last bills that need to be paid. So all of these administrative things have to be done to close out their estate after their passing. So that's what I mean by probate.
Now, when you say estate, to me, that conjures images of literally a large manor. I'm from the South, so I'm thinking about some antebellum plantation house. But when you say estate, it doesn't mean that they have a whole lot of money. It's just whatever, I guess, their balance of assets and liabilities were. Is that kind of what you mean when you say estate?
It is, but I mean, they could have a bunch of assets. They could have
Right.
tons of valuable assets. So when I say estate, I mean anything that is solely owned by them at the time of their death.
Gotcha.
So whether that's a car, a house, a bank account, a retirement account, anything that they own that did not have a beneficiary nor a joint owner.
Okay. But debts, so bills that they still owe, let's say they have a car loan, that type of thing, is that considered as part of your estate as well, or how would you categorize that
It's considered a debt against the estate.
against estate? Okay.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Wow.
So your personal representative, whoever's administering your estate or handling the probate, they would make sure to pay any final debts
Okay.
before disposing of your assets.
Gotcha. And that's funny
Yeah.
because I hinted at that as well in the opening to this episode. And quick pause. People out here watching, I hope y'all are taking notes because Shawty's giving us the game, and I told Attorney Carter not to give us everything now, leave a little something on the plate so y'all can come to her if you need something. But I mean, this goes to the quality of the person I mentioned that we had on air, someone that is really out here for the culture, for all people and all cultures, but especially our own. So Attorney Carter, thank you so much for everything you shared so far. This has definitely been one of the more substantive episodes we've had. And this next question, it may be a little redundant, but let's hone in real quick. So we've talked about estate planning, which encompasses, I know, like wills, estates, and trusts. So how can specifically give me 3 ways that having an estate plan helps to either maintain wealth that is in a family or create generational wealth, or is it something that it creates, or is it only a tool that protects it? I just want to make that distinction, see what you think there.
Mhm. No, it can do both.
Okay.
So, for instance, in my practice, it's not just me. I work with um, financial advisors. I've built relationships with financial advisors all over the state because when we sit down to talk about your estate plan, one of the first questions is, what is your goal? Are we just here to make sure that your best friend gets your car, or are we thinking about your children and your grandchildren and how we're going to fund their education? What are your goals? What are you trying to do for yourself and for the next generation? How do you want to basically leave a blessing for them? Those are some of the questions. And so in having that discussion, we can figure out, okay, maybe we need to pair you with a financial advisor so that we can figure out how you can get started with setting up a plan to create wealth for the next generation. And one way of doing that could be increasing the premiums on your life insurance policy so you can leave a bigger policy, something that's not just enough to bury you, but maybe enough to pay off the house.
Mm, okay.
So, yes, you can do both. You can preserve wealth and you can create wealth. So, you also asked me, I think you wanted to know 3 ways that we could
Yeah, and I
create
think you just gave me
wealth.
one right there. Our biggest reasons why Black people specifically, if we're trying to create generational wealth, like why we need to use this and how specifically that we can.
Okay. One way in particular that's extremely important, I think, is by keeping current titles in terms of our home, our land. So you and I have talked about this before, right? We know that there's a lot of heirs property out there. We know that our community in particular has lost hundreds of thousands of acres of land. That's not a secret to anyone. Keeping a current title on the land, one way that this benefits us is that when we pass away, there is someone that's on that title that can talk to the mortgage company if there's a mortgage on the home to make sure that it stays up to date, to be able to assume the mortgage if needed, and to even communicate with them in terms of paying it off.
Gotcha.
Um, One way that this can be a huge benefit is that if you have a current owner on the title always, then that homestead exemption that we have on our property can always be maximized. So thereby eliminating or decreasing the tax debt, the tax liability on the home,
Mhm.
and preventing the property from being lost due to unpaid taxes, or via tax foreclosure, or due to an audit from the county. So that tax exemption that I just mentioned, what can happen if you pass away and you don't have a remainder and someone else on your title to inherit the home, then that means there's no one qualified to earn the tax exemption. The downside of that means that the tax exemption that's being applied, if the county catches it and audits the account, they can go back and retroactively say, hey, you owe us some money because we gave you this discount you weren't entitled to. So now you've got extra taxes on the home that now need to be paid, and maybe you can't afford to pay them. And so that land, that home that we owned is now gone. So keeping a current title on the home, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to preserve wealth, because we know that land always appreciates. Well, usually it's supposed to appreciate. And it is generally one of our most valuable assets, our retirement and our land. So that's two. And then a third way, I would say the third way it would be more so communicating with the financial advisor regarding whatever your goals are, and letting them kind of help you navigate the waters to see what else you can do. If you want to perhaps pay for your child's education, well, talking to them and talking to me can help us figure out a plan to see, well, with your current budget and your child's current age, what can we afford to put in your 529 plan to finance their education debt-free to them. So utilizing the financial planner in addition to an estate planning attorney, I would say would be number three to help you meet the goals that you're setting for yourself in your retirement, in addition to how you want to leave a legacy and a blessing for that next generation.
Love it, man. Wow. You just kind of blew my mind with the tax portion, which I shouldn't be surprised because you know how taxes be. But so essentially, just to hone back in on that section, I could have been up to date on my taxes. I maybe got a couple of exemptions, but then I die intestate without a will, without someone else um, being authorized on the title. And then they assume the title, and then they'll retroactively charge them taxes that I already paid for just because they weren't properly assigned. Is that pretty much what you were saying?
Not quite, not that you paid. So at the time that you pass, that
Mhm.
homestead exemption expires with you.
Okay.
So we don't have another beneficiary already on the title. And that, there's a way to do that. One way is called a joint ownership or a life estate deed. So we don't have another owner that's already present and able to take over the responsibility for that home and apply for the homestead exemption. Then if that homestead exemption is being given, then yes, when the county gets wind of the fact that the original owner is now gone and we don't have a new owner that has applied for their own exemption, then yes, that gap, they can collect the difference in taxes.
And that can be retroactively, you said.
Hmm. Yes.
Yikes, man. Wow. And there ain't nobody at the county office or wherever that's gonna be like, yeah, sorry, I understand this happens all the time. We got you. We'll let you. They're like, no, pay up, right?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
Okay. So all of this sounds great, right? And I have as you're talking, knowing Black people as I do, knowing our wonderful people, I know that there's some things that people are probably thinking watching this. So I'm gonna ask you, and then I'm gonna share mine. I'm gonna see if we're kind of on the same page. But as you're as you're out marketing and as you're talking to people and as you're taking in clients, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that Black people have about estate planning? Like, what are the challenges that you personally have in getting them to see the benefits of it, if any? Or in general, what do you hear some of the things they talk about, the notions that you have to dispel?
I think the first one is that I'm young. I don't need an estate plan. That's for older people.
Mm,
And it's not. I think I mentioned this earlier, that if you are 18 and you own anything, you qualify. you should be executing some kind of estate plan. The other that I mentioned is if you have children, you want to be able to name a guardian. And so that's why an estate plan should matter to you. So, it's no longer, so get rid of that myth that it's just for older people, because it's not. I think the other that I encounter often is estate planning is just for rich people, for wealthy people. And that's not true either. Although I absolutely understand why people have that belief, because we weren't necessarily a part of the conversation for estate planning. It wasn't about us. It wasn't for all people. It really was for the wealthy and how they could continue to hold on to what they had, right? And so you would hear key words like high net worth individual and investment portfolio and think, okay, that's just for rich people. It's not. It is for all of us. We know, and I think I might have mentioned this already too, but we know how there's so much heirs property out there that, grandmama's house, it was grandmama's house, but nobody ever completed a probate on her estate. And when she died, Uncle so-and-so moved in, and Uncle Sammy, he paid the taxes until he died. And then when Uncle Sammy died, cousin Beretta moved in. Nobody changes the title on it. And so it's this heirs property from generation to generation. And so I think, that's one thing that we need to keep in mind when we're saying that it's not for us, because it is. If we own something, it is our duty we've worked hard to acquire it. So it's our duty to make the decision as to what happens to it when we expire. So those are two myths that I would say we got to get rid of. It's not just for old people or our older generation. And it's not just for the wealthy.
That pretty much jives with what I was thinking about. But the one thing that was glaring to me is that there seems to be like a stigma in the Black community about talking about death. It's almost like we think we're gonna bring it on, like, oh, we can be very superstitious as a people, right? Stevie wanted to let us know that. And it's just that when you talk to someone about, hey, having a life insurance policy, making a will, it's almost like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Why are you bringing that on me? Knock on wood type of thing. But when I've talked to people about it, when I talk to some of my own family, that's the response I've gotten. So, like, how do you overcome that? Just really laying out the facts, or do you find that people are too emotional to even let that get through to them? Because to me, it's sometimes that's the complete shutdown of the conversation when people bring up those types of rebuttals. So I would just hope, it sounds like you don't have any trouble overcoming those types of objections, but I was just interested if you had ever heard that yourself as well.
Plenty. All the time. Yeah. And unfortunately, one thing that I have experienced is that it does seem to be that it's more of the older generation that seems to have that type of superstition. Mm-hmm. And I think, a part of it is that we have to realize that with life comes death, right? That's not a surprise to anybody. That's just how it works. You have to get to know the individual and find out what matters most to them to overcome it. So for me, one thing that I've noticed is that in some families, you see that matriarch or patriarch of the family, they are the glue. Everybody meets at Big Mama's house on Sunday for dinner. This is where we spend our quality time. This is when we see one another. This is when we really just love on each other. It's at these special places, this, Mama's house, Daddy's house. And when they're gone, how do we maintain that family harmony? And unfortunately, I think that this is something that, it's heartbreaking to me, because this is, I think, where we see the divide in the family almost immediately. Exactly. Is when that matriarch or patriarch dies. Yep. And if they haven't come up with an estate plan, you've got the family at war with one another as to what mama really wanted. And I was supposed to get this, and I did this. I was the one that was here. You lived out of state. That fighting starts. And so when you remind, for me at least, I feel like when I get to talking to them and I find out who's important to them, what's important to them, I can kind of tap into getting them to get beyond their fears of doing the estate planning, because the family harmony is more important than my superstition. Usually it is. And so even though it's a sensitive topic, you find what's important to them and you tap into that and get them to start joining you in the conversation. Well, just what would you want, And a lot of times they'll open up to you a bit more because now you're talking to them about what really matters. So anyway, I think it's more of just getting to know the client and understanding what's near and dear to their heart, and helping them to understand that a part of maintaining their legacy is by creating an estate plan, setting the boundaries, the foundation now, so that there's no fighting at that point. What can your loved ones do but come together and support one another and honor your wishes?
To me, that's honestly, that should be one of the easiest reasons that everybody's like, okay, we got to do this, because you know how cousin John is or whatever, because he gonna start saying stuff if he don't get grandma's cooking dishes or something. You know what I'm saying? It's always something. Everybody got those little nuances in their family. And I mean, if you can say estate planning is how we avoid that, my question to you is, would you or do you recommend that your clients disclose some of the contents of their will? Like, hey, go ahead and let people know who's getting what, so it ain't no surprise when it comes? Or is that just that's confidential to them, and you wouldn't recommend them releasing that until, the untimely passing?
So I'm going to answer that question and one other question, one that you didn't ask me.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think that it is absolutely essential that there's communication between the family so that they know that estate planning has been done. One of the worst things that can happen is for you to create an estate plan and nobody know that it exists. So for instance, this happened in my own family. I had a cousin who had a life insurance policy that we all knew was in existence and knew who the beneficiary was. But at the time of her passing, nobody could find the policy. And it was years. This was before I went to law school. It was years before we were able to find it. I mean, now I have the education, so I know how to tap into some of those sources and find those things. But that is not uncommon. A lot of families have lost wealth because they just didn't know where to find the documentation. We know mama paid on that policy all her life, but we don't know who the company was that administered the policy. And that's devastating. That's devastating. Because of the investment that she made, and then the fact that it was to benefit the family, but the family can't find it. So having communication around what has been done and what is in existence, it absolutely matters. Whether or not you tell your family what's in your will is up to you, because you know your family and you know who can handle what. So if you've made some distributions in your will that certain family members will take issue with, you might not want to have a conversation about it at this point. Maybe telling some ones that you can trust so that they know, but telling all of them might not be the best thing to do, because even then it could start some tension among the family. But the thing that I worry about most when you have certain loved ones who can be a bit, I'm just going to say, manipulative and selfish. And I know that sounds bad, but unfortunately, you do have some people, that are me-minded. And so there have been situations where they have taken advantage of that loved one at times when they were vulnerable or lost capacity, and made some changes, forced them to make some changes under duress. So you do have to be careful. I would never just say openly, yeah, share it, because I could be setting you up for something that could, in the end, contradict the plan that you put in place. So you decide how much you're going to share, because it's very personal to you, and you know your loved ones better than anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Shout out to you for remaining the compassionate, empathetic person you are, being around a lot of the ugliness. There are certain people who are in different professions. Police officers are definitely one of them. It's people that work in morgues and attorneys, just a few. It's like y'all see some of the worst of humanity in some very trying moments. So for you to be able to be in the world, but not of the world, so to speak, it's no small thing. So shout out to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, man, I think that you've answered everything that I initially thought that, people would want to know. The last thing I ask everyone that comes on the show is give us some action steps. So if somebody says, okay, I get it, you sold me. I need to get an estate plan. I need to get a will. I need to get all of these things. I'm going to do everything. What can I do today to start using these tools to ensure that I create and protect the generational wealth? What would you say people, hey, do these first 3 to 5 or just one thing, however many? Like, what does that look
Okay.
like?
Sure. So I mentioned the power of attorney and the advanced directives. Wherever you are, find out where you can access your state's statutory documents and complete those for yourself. That's your protection. Just like you're protecting your car and your home,
Right.
protect you. So fill out those forms first. Then look at your beneficiary designation, look at your assets and see which ones have beneficiary designations. So whether it's your bank account, those have beneficiary designation forms. So
Mm,
look at those because those are liquid assets that can be immediately available. So make sure those are up to date. Go back and look at the paperwork you filled out with your employer, your life insurance policy, your retirement benefits. See if all of those have a living beneficiary. We forget sometimes to update these things, but people die, we get married, we get divorced, we have children, we adopt children, we go through a lot of different life events that could impact how we want things to be administered. So keep your beneficiary designations up to date. And for my Marylanders, I'll tell you really quickly, Maryland MVA has a beneficiary designation that you can use for your vehicle. It's a $20 fee. Takes about 10 minutes to fill out. And that form will allow you again to designate somebody to inherit your car upon your passing. All they have to do at that point is to show up with their ID and, of course, a copy of the death certificate and present it. And it keeps the vehicle out of probate and it is theirs right away. So those are really good forms to utilize as well. And then after you've done those things, all right, you've started the process. Let's now look for an estate planning attorney. Do your search online, read client reviews, talk to other professionals that might network or know this particular attorney that you're thinking of using, and get a feel for them. You want to make sure that the attorney you're working with is someone you can trust, because I'm going to tell you, we get all in your business. We have to ask the questions. We need to know, this person that you said is your cousin, is this really your cousin or is this your play cousin? We need to know so that we can make sure that your plan is administered properly and so that the right people are identified in your estate plan. So find an attorney that you're going to be comfortable talking to, because again, they're going to be all in your business as necessary. That's how we look out for you. And then once you've done that, the last piece that I will say that we don't always talk about, but it's an essential piece too, is go ahead and do that last piece of postmortem planning. If you are donating your body, well, you know that those costs and fees will be taken care of. But if you want to be cremated or buried, figure out who you want to handle your body, where you want to be buried, what the costs are associated with this. And if you can pay for it now, pay for it now, because I have seen that there's almost a 40% difference when you pay ahead versus having to pay for it at the time of your passing. But not just that, that's the financial piece. The piece that matters most, well, for me personally, I am all about that family harmony. And I think about your family grieving your loss, but having to do this administrative task of planning your funeral. If you can take some of that burden off of them so that they can simply console one another and grieve and think about you, then I say do that last piece. It just takes off such a burden. And I think a lot of us have probably experienced that before. We're grieving, but we've got a plan too. So those are some things that you can do immediately to get started that will protect you and put you on the track to setting up some things that will just really make a huge impact for the next generation.
Absolutely. Love it, man. Wow. So, and I mean, I'm just thinking like everybody who's going to see this episode knows or has been in a situation of having family members fighting after a matriarch or patriarch passes. Or it doesn't even have to be a matriarch or patriarch, it could be anyone in the family. There's always like that's probably one of the most common things to the Black experience and even to everyone's experience. I mean, looking at the numbers out there. So I mean, this is of the utmost importance, man. And Attorney Carter, I know we've kept you a little bit longer than scheduled, but I was thinking as you were talking, one more thing that I think would be a huge way to drive the point home of how important this is. If you can keep it confidential, I know how the attorney-client privilege goes. Can you give us one of your worst horror stories of what happens when you don't have some of these things in place, just briefly, to drive home to, hey, don't let this be you?
Sure, I can think of one immediately. Did I mention something about insurance earlier? I mean, excuse me, life insurance earlier?
Hmm.
Did I give you a story though to go with it? And
You
forgive
told
me
me
because
about
I
your own.
say that again.
You told us about your own. I don't know if that's the one you're talking about, but how you
That
got to the
oh,
policy.
okay, okay. No, there's a different one. And I'm sorry because I had to do a presentation earlier today. Now I can't remember who I said what to. So I'm sorry. One of the worst situations that I have encountered is this was in my own family. And I mean, I can think of plenty, but I'll tell you about one in my family. I had an aunt who had been married young and she divorced. It was a pretty horrible marriage, I'll say, because there was some abuse. She remarried, met the love of her life, was married for over 50 years. She forgot to update her beneficiary designation form on her life insurance policy with her job. So when she died, that policy was paid out to her ex-husband. Sometimes, we forget to go back and update those forms, but that's what I was saying earlier. When we have life-changing events, it is
Yeah.
imperative that we update these forms. So unfortunately, this was a situation where even if she had had a will, the will would not have changed anything because that insurance policy is a separate contract. And
Mhm.
so the insurance company is going to honor what is in those documents. They are not concerned about what's in your will. That contract that you sign with them that identifies your beneficiary, that's the one that they're going to follow. And unfortunately, the other piece was that when she got the divorce, the settlement agreement did not waive their interest in each other's life insurance policies and retirements and that sort of thing. Practice has definitely evolved over the years, so we know
No.
to include those things, which for me, fortunately, I do both. I do family law and estate planning. So I'm
Yeah.
always thinking in terms of both sides. But that's one thing that I would say that that's not the first time and only time I've seen it just in my family. I've seen that happen plenty and with quite a few assets. So I really can't tell you, how much more important it is. It's imperative. You need to
Yeah.
keep things updated, and planning sooner than later is always better.
So just to clarify, you're saying that not only did he get he was the beneficiary of her insurance policy that she had paid on for years and years. He also got some of her retirement or pension money. Is that correct?
No, he did not get her retirement or pension. I was making a point that
Okay. I was going
when
to say
you,
because that would have just been like all time right there.
right. I mean, it was just sad enough that he got the life insurance policy
I can
because it was a pretty
imagine so.
sizable policy. Even if it were $5, still her desire would have been for it to go to her husband.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
but I was just talking about when we do settlement agreements during a divorce, we're careful to make sure that unless the parties agree otherwise, that we are saying, hey, at the time of death, you are waiving your interest in this person's retirement, their life insurance. You are waiving any ability to recover from their estate. So that did not happen in hers. And that would have been another way to correct the situation. But because it was the language wasn't there,
Wow.
there was no way to stop him from receiving those funds.
Yeah, I dare say that you have plenty of reasons, personal and professional, to be as passionate as you are about this. So, I mean, you're a real gift to me as a friend, professionally and personally, and I know to your clients, man. So, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and wrap up right here. Can you tell the audience where to reach you and how to contact you as far as getting any further questions or if they want to retain you for their own matters?
Absolutely. So first, I'll say thank you for the compliment. I think you and your family are a real gift as well. So I am grateful to know you. Thank you for allowing me to be here to share this information because I love sharing. Like that's the golden nugget to me in terms of being able to practice, and that's educating others. So I'm glad to pass this information along. Anyone that wants to reach out to us, you can find us at carterlaw-firm.com. And if I can give you a quick shout out, Mr. White, he created my website, so I'm sure you guys are going to love it. If you go to the site, you will see a link or a tab, where you can schedule an appointment with us online. You can also call the office, of course, at 443-205-1432. And my paralegal, Angelica, who is also my sister and a fantastic asset to the firm, will make sure to get you on the book so that we can see how best we can serve you.
Absolutely. And folks, we're going to, when the videos are posted across the different platforms, we're going to do our best to make sure that Attorney Carter is linked in and looped in as far as any questions that anyone happens to post. We'll try to get those answers to you, if not via proxy, directly connecting you with her. So, man, this is a great one. And I'm a believer. I'm a believer now. I mean, as if I wasn't before, estate planning, it's an essential tool. You can do everything else, every other episode that we're going to cover on this program, financial advising, getting your plans together, right? Having a 401k, working with investors, all of that can go down the drain if you don't have a plan for what happens when it's your time to go, right? So it's of the utmost importance. Once again, Attorney Carter, thank you so much for being with us today, okay?
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.
And you too. All right, folks. So next week, or the next coming weeks, we're going to have our episode number 4. Stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing that via our social media platforms. Follow us at Our Black Progress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And we'll be talking to you all again very soon. Have a good evening.